And we obviously want to be respectful of everybody's time. So I welcome you. I am Jennifer Keller of the Westport Library. Today, I'm super excited. Ooh, excuse me on that one. If somebody has a microphone open right now, I think I might be playing back. Nope, okay, great. Let me start that over again. Hi, I'm Jennifer Keller with the Westport Library. And today I'm excited to host our first cook-along demonstration with Wakeman Town Farm. For all of you who registered, you should have received recipes earlier today from Eventbrite so that you can follow along in your own kitchen or make these great dishes on your own afterward. And we're super excited. Please keep your microphones muted through this event and type any questions that you may have in the chat on the bottom of your screen, which is pretty much in the middle underneath all of us. I will be reading questions to Nancy as we go along, so that'll be a fun way to keep involved. So Nancy Wolfson-Moche is the author of Vegetables for Breakfast from A to Z, and is a certified macrobiotic counselor and culinary medicine practitioner who helps people to improve their health and well-being through food. She teaches food awareness and culinary arts programs for both children and adults, as well as being a certified Yoga Alliance and Torah yoga teacher. Nancy, if that wasn't enough, Nancy has also been an editor and writer for lifestyle magazines. So I want to welcome everybody, and especially Nancy, and now I am going to bring Nancy onto the screen. Welcome, Nancy.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you to the Westport Library and to Wakeman Town Farm for having me. What better thing to cook on a hot day than vegetables? And when we planned this event, I had a feeling that it wouldn't be a good idea to use the oven. So, so we are going to use the stove, but basically we're going to make 3 dishes. 2 of them are from my book, and one I actually created for this event. So vegetables, and particularly these 3 dishes that we're going to cook, one is a grain dish, are delicious at any time of day. So for me, in my life, I made some really big lifestyle changes and changed my diet as well. And one of the biggest differences in the way I lived and the way I ate was that I began eating vegetables for breakfast. It ended up transforming my whole life. You can read more about it in my book. I was able to have 2 beautiful daughters, one of whom is helping me here today. She's 13, and her name is Mayan. And so I wanted to share that with the world. We're all used to eating vegetables at lunch and at dinner, but not so much at breakfast. So what we're going to cook now, I hope you'll enjoy for dinner, and then eat the leftovers tomorrow morning for breakfast. By the way, I do this every Tuesday at around this time at 4:30. I have what I call a supper club, where we get together and cook a 3-course meal. I think some of my regulars are here with us, so welcome to everyone. So we're going to make 3 dishes, and we're going to start with dessert, which is a cucumber melon mousse. Then we're going to make a risotto, which you can do with barley. I'm going to do it with barley, but if you couldn't find hulled barley, which is the barley with the fiber on it, then you can use any kind of rice for risotto, which would be arborio or carnaroli or vialone nano. Those 3 types of rice really expand with liquid, as does the barley. And if you couldn't find hulled barley, you can use pearl barley. Again, it's not a whole grain, but it'll actually cook a little quicker. And the third dish we're going to make is a matchstick salad using watermelon, radish, and carrots. Okay, so we're going to start with the melon mousse. I'm going to move over to my stove. And the reason it's a vegetable dish is because what we use is a seaweed called agar-agar that makes liquids gel. So first, just to let you know, I have my broth, the vegetable broth that I made this morning, just heating up on my stove. And I've poured 2 cups of water into this pot, just regular, in my case, it's well water. And now I'm going to add 4 tablespoons of the agar-agar, which comes in a little package. You can get one by the company Eden. It's orderable on Amazon. And I'm just going to sprinkle the flakes on top. Now, generally, you use 1 tablespoon of agar-agar flakes per cup of liquid. But I have 2 cups of water in here, but we're going to make a liquid, a melon and cucumber liquid, that's going to be about another 2 cups. So I'm adding 4 cups. And what I'm doing, the way this works is it has to dissolve into the water in order to become a binder. And so I'm just going to let it sit on top of the water and kind of sink in for about 10 minutes. The other thing we add is a pinch of salt. So before we really get started, I want to tell you that I generally work with 3 different kinds of salt over here. So I have a fine sea salt, fine-ish, medium fine, from Trapani, Sicily. And I have a coarse sea salt from Mexico, Colima salt. And then I have some sea salt flakes, Maldon, French. Those are sort of finishing salts, and we're going to use all 3. So for the, I'm just going to add a pinch of coarse sea salt to the water. Okay, and as you know, salt draws out flavor. So I'm going to let it sit with the salt and the agar-agar. And in the meantime, we're going to make the melon cucumber mixture. So basically, we're going to use, I cubed a whole honeydew melon. Actually, my daughter helped me. And we're going to use part of a cucumber. So this is a nice Persian cucumber. I'm just going to trim the ends. If you want, you can peel it. This one's organic, so I'm going to leave the skin on. It gives it a beautiful green color. And I think I'm only going to use about 3/4 of this. Is that what I say in the recipe? So I'm going to just cut it into pieces. And then I'm going to layer the honeydew and the cucumber into the blender. How many do
1 Persian cucumber. 1
Persian, okay. So I called for a whole cucumber. Basically, you want to have a little more honeydew. So I like to layer things in my blender. This is a Vitamix, just because I find it tends to integrate a little bit better. So we're basically combining honeydew and cucumber and a little bit of yogurt. You can use goat gurt or regular cow yogurt, or you could use a vegan one made from coconut milk or one of the nut milks.
Nancy, we have one question that I'd like to interrupt you for just 1 second. If someone wants to make this but doesn't have the agar-agar, what can we use as a substitute?
So I'm so glad somebody asked that question. Without the agar-agar, it's not going to gel. So if you don't have the agar-agar, what I suggest is you follow me in making the melon and cucumber mix, and then you put it in a jar and put it in your fridge. and let it chill, and it's a delicious cold soup. Because without the agar-agar, it's just not going to come together. It's just going to be, you know, it's just going to be a drink, a soup. But this is a really delicious cold soup, especially on a day like this. So if you don't have the agar-agar, just forget about that first step. So, and follow me from here. So I think I called for 4 ounces of yogurt.
Yeah, 4 ounces.
Yeah, the yogurt, so I'm not a huge fan of yogurt, but in this case, it gives it a really nice kind of cloudy green color. And it also, of course, yogurt is fermented, so it gives it a really nice umami flavor. So I'm just gonna add a little more cucumber. And the one thing I do add to this is a little bit of white pepper. So the white pepper just gives it a really nice kick in contrast to all of the sweetness of the honeydew and the cucumber. And one thing I forgot to mention is it's always best when making this as a mousse to start with honeydew at room temperature, because we're going to be adding the hot liquid to it. So one thing I learned in Italy in my years of living in Italy and going to cooking schools in Italy, a lot of Italian cooks talk about food like it's human. And of course, food is alive, particularly all of this food that was just recently picked. So you don't want to shock it too much. So, so you don't want to put something really cold into something really hot. And right now, has it been 10 minutes since we started? No?
There's still 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. So I'm just gonna check and have a look over here. If you bring the camera over, you can see that the agar, is generally, it's kind of beginning to integrate. So I'm gonna turn on the flame. I'm gonna turn it on to kind of a medium low. I'm also gonna give it a nice stir. And you can see that they're no longer flakes. Now it looks kind of cloudy. And we're gonna let it cook as we continue over here. Okay, so I'm going to add the rest of the melon.
And Nancy, can we use melons other than honeydew for this?
Melon?
Melons other than honeydew.
Okay, so that's a great question. Well, first of all, I wouldn't use cantaloupe for the juice because it's not nearly as watery. If you use watermelon, it's going to be a completely different juice. And the honeydew works really well with the cucumber. So I don't know. I haven't tried it with watermelon. I haven't really tried it with anything else. But you definitely wouldn't want to use a drier melon because as you're going to see, I'm going to blend this now. And you're going to see how it comes together really nicely. Just the 2 things I forgot, okay, are the basil and mint. So I'm going to add about 4 nice fresh basil leaves from my garden, just picked. Maybe another few for good measure. Remember, cooking is part art and part science. And this is the art. And then I have 4 different kinds of mint from my garden. For this, I really love, so I'm gonna add about 6 mint leaves. So I have an orange mint, and I have a spearmint, and I have a peppermint. And on a day like this, I'm just gonna be really generous with the mint because what's more refreshing than a nice minty dessert? Okay, so I have the honeydew, the cucumber, the basil, the mint, and the white pepper. So I don't know if you want to mute me, Jennifer, when I turn this on. It's not too loud. So it's really important that you not get any chunks for this. So I'm just gonna check it and make sure that everything integrated really nicely, and so it did. It also has these gorgeous little flecks of mint and basil. So this is ready. Now we're just going to wait for the agar-agar mix. Honey, can you just put this in the sink? Yeah. Okay. So one thing I didn't mention is I always cook, you always want to have a nice, clean, untreated pop-up sponge as you cook. So I just popped it into the water, and you can see it popping up. In most of my classes with kids, they really love this. I love it because it's a little bit magical, just like cooking is. It's about transformation, and cooking is all about transformation, about transforming, in this case, mostly plants, into various things, from a cold soup to a mousse. So if you don't have the agar-agar, take this mixture, pour it into a jar, and put it in your fridge to chill. It's really nice if you put it in for like an hour.
Happening.
Sorry?
The agar-agar.
Okay, something's happening over here. The agar-agar boiled, and that's fine. So I'm just, it's pretty well integrated. So if you are cooking along, or if you're gonna do this later, you wanna make sure that there aren't any clumps. You don't want the agar-agar to clump, because that is what actually gels the mousse. So you wanna make sure that there aren't any big clumps on your spoon or at the bottom of your pot. So mine looks really good. So I'm going to turn it off. I have my broth simmering for the risotto on the back burner, because that needs to be really hot. So, so I'm just giving this a good mix and making sure that all of the seaweed, the sea vegetable, is really well integrated. Okay, so yeah, I see a little bit clumping, so I'm just gonna dip my spoon in and allow it to dissolve. Okay. Sorry? Wooden spoon, my husband adds. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, you really don't want to use metal ever on a stainless steel pot. You want to use wood. Okay. So just take it away. So now I'm going to leave this here for 1 moment on a really low flame. And what we're going to do is take some dessert cups. So I have these various kinds. And what we're going to do is we're going to layer the cucumber melon juice with the agar-agar. So I'm just going to put, I'm going to fill each cup about 1/3 of the way with the melon mixture. Whoops. Okay, so this is a great lesson in estimation, right? So you really need to take care with this. Okay, so I think they're somewhat even. And now, sweetie, can you just put this in the sink? Thank you. Now I'm going to bring the agar-agar mix over. And I'm going to add a little bit of this. So again, we want to do 2 layers of each. So I have 1 layer of the juice, and now I'm going to add a little bit of the agar-agar water. And the other thing I forgot to mention is if you love really, really sweet desserts, you can add a little bit of brown rice syrup to the water. I find this is just sweet enough without it, but my palate is a little bit adjusted. Okay, so now we've got a layer of the cucumber melon juice and a layer of the agar-agar. And now we're gonna finish it with another layer of juice. And I may have a little too much for these. So maybe you can wash out that other little bowl and we'll do that one. And then I'm gonna put this on top.
This little bowl?
No, the bowl that you just washed, you just brought over to the sink, sweetie.
That's a big
Okay. Now the reason I'm short on dessert cups is because I made a batch ahead of time this morning so that I could show you how it's gonna look. So what you need to do is you need to leave this out at room temperature. I like to take a sushi mat and cover it and wait until it gels to put it in the fridge. So I'm just gonna put it over here.
While you're doing that, can I ask, does agar-agar have a flavor of its own?
That's a great question. So I would say no. It, unlike some other seaweeds, you're probably thinking of nori or kombu kelp or wakame that have a really salty flavor. This does not. It's very neutral, which is why it's often used in candy, jelly candies. If you look at the ingredients, if it doesn't have an animal gelatin, it's often got agar-agar in it. Okay, so I'm just gonna finish this one. So you can put it in a nice big bowl and then dole it out, but I'm gonna show you, I'm gonna cheat a little bit and show you how you can finish it. Okay, good. So I used all the agar-agar mixture, and you wanna be sure that there aren't big clumps on the bottom of your pot, because if there are, that means it probably won't work. Okay. Okay, so you want to leave it in a well-ventilated place in your kitchen, in a place that's relatively cool so that it can gel. Sweetie, can you just take this and put it in the sink? You can leave it on the, we'll finish it later. Okay, thank you. Okay, so, so what we're going to do now is we're going to start on the risotto and get it cooking, and then I'll show you the finish on the dessert. So we could take this away. Thank you. Okay, you can put this away, sweetie. So barley risotto. If you have hulled barley like this, then it looks a little brownish, right? Because it's the whole barley. Pearled barley has the bran on the outside polished off. So it's not a whole grain, right? A whole grain contains the bran, the germ or the seed, and the endosperm, which feeds the germ or the seed. So if you're using hulled barley, that's fine. If you're using arborio rice, Dave, you gotta see where you're, okay. Then you should have 2 cups measured and washed. So what we're gonna do is we're going to cut onions. I like to use ramps in the springtime, but it's no longer spring. So we're gonna use onions. These I just picked from my garden. They still have some of the wonderful dirt on them. So I'm gonna just trim this. Now the reason I use a sponge is so that whenever I'm working on a clean slate. Okay, here we go. So I'm just gonna peel this. Sweetie, can you put all of this in the compost for me? Thank you. Excellent. So there is a way, probably many of you are foodies, There is a way to cut an onion so that you get the most nutrients from the onion, and that is cutting it lengthwise. Sorry, I wanted to leave all the dirt on to show you how gorgeous these are. I'm so proud of them. But now I want to get it all off. Okay. But, you know, a little dirt gives you a little vitamin B in your food. Okay, great. So we want to clean the blade of our knife and the board each time. So I'm going to cut the onion. You want to mince the onion. So I'm going to cut it lengthwise down the center. And then there are all kinds of tricks. I like to cut it all the way through. Some people don't. Some people just cut it part of the way. And then I cut it the opposite way. So basically you want the size, the onion pieces to be about the same size as the grain. So the grains of barley are about the same size as the grains of rice if you're using risotto, if you're using arborio or carnaroli or bialone nano. And by the way, in Italy, real food snobs never use arborio. They always use carnaroli or bialone nano. Okay, so these are two tiny little onions. This is one. Here's the other. So this is a good time, if there are any questions, Jennifer, to interrupt as I just mince these onions.
Well, that's great. Why do onions have more nutrients if you cut them lengthwise?
Okay, that's a beautiful question. I wish I had heard it a minute ago, but I can show you that when you cut it lengthwise, you see more of the layers and more of those layers are exposed. So that means more of those layers get into your, in this case, into the food. In this case, you know, we are mincing them. So, you know, when I teach life skills in cooking, one of the life skills that I teach is the way you do anything is the way you do everything. So the reason I'm cutting, so how much does it matter? I don't know, but I think everything you do matters a little bit and changes the whole energy and taste of the dish. So I like to just put everything I have into every step along the way. So that's the onion. And now, because I'm using barley, I'm going to add a little garlic. This is fresh garlic from this beautiful farm up the street called Chanticleer Acres. If I'm just using rice, arborio or carnaroli or bialone nano, then I would probably not add the garlic, although some people would. It just depends on your palate. So I think I'm just going to use two. And I'm just going to mince the garlic. I'm going to keep it separate because we want to put each ingredient in separately.
Okay, so while you're doing that, if I could also ask, we have another question. Why should we use wooden spoons and not metal spoons when cooking?
Okay, so that's another great question. And so obviously wood and metal have completely different energies, right? So wood was once alive, it was once a tree. And also depending on the wooden spoon you're using, I try to use wooden spoons that aren't at all treated. Whereas metal is man-made. I mean, so are spoons, but they're whittled. So, so you want to put as much energy of the earth into your food, which is why it's so important to, I think, to cut everything yourself rather than using food processors and stuff. So now we're going to move over to the stove where the broth is simmering. So as I said in the recipe, you can use a ready-made vegetable broth, or you can make your own. So I went to a cooking school in Italy for a week once, Capezzana, where they explained that you want your broth always to be as simple as possible because it's really there to enhance or reflect your risotto. So I used a little bit of celery, and you always want the broth to mirror your dish, right? So we're making a risotto with peas and arugula. So I used peas and arugula, and then I used some fresh herbs from my garden, as well as some garlic and onion. Took it all out, of course. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to heat up the pan with enough olive oil to cover. And I'm letting the broth get a little bit hotter. So cooking chopsticks are one of my all-time favorite tools. And once the pan is warmed up, I'm going to add the onion. The reason I'm adding the onion first is because garlic tends to burn, and you do not want your garlic to burn. So I'm just adding the onion first. I'm also, once it begins to sweat a little bit, to get translucent, I'm going to add just a little bit of sea salt, of this beautiful sea salt from Trapani from Sicily, in the spirit of the dish. And also it's just the right grade. It's just the right coarseness, which is kind of medium. So you can see it's starting to simmer. And the broth is also starting to simmer. So this is another good time for questions if there are any.
Oh, yes, we do have one. One of our viewers would like to know where you buy the pop-up sponges.
Great question. I like the Trader Joe's ones. They come, I think you get 12 for about $7.99. You can find the Trader Joe's on Amazon. For me, I think it's one of the best products Trader Joe's sells. And now I'm going to add the, I'm happy to share the link if you email me afterwards. So now I'm just adding the garlic and trying to integrate it. Now again, you know, a recipe is a guide. So these were 2 very small onions. In another situation, I might add a little more. If you really love alliums, you know, a lot of kick and spice in your food, then you might want to add more onion and garlic and or. So I'm just sprinkling a little sea salt on.
And which oil did you use?
So I used an olive oil. This one happens to be Tunisian. It's a really nice cooking oil. And once the onions are kind of getting golden brown, then you're going to add your grain. So in this case, it's barley, but if you're using a risotto rice like carnaroli or bielone nano, now's the time to add it. And what you want to do is you want to try to coat each grain of rice, or in this case barley, with the oil. And again, this is done with great care, and I am sure that you taste it in the end. I am sure of that. It's kind of like a great hair cutter that cuts every single strand of hair on your head. It really shows in the end. You're not sure why. It's that je ne sais quoi, but something is different, right? So now I'm going to move on to a wooden spoon because that's going to help me with the barley. And you can see it has like a really nice shine. So once you feel that the barley is coated, or the rice, or the risotto rice, then you're going to begin to add the broth. And you can see mine is really simmering, so it's nice and hot. So you want to begin want to begin by adding a few ladlefuls of cover. Now the barley, the risotto rice is going to cook faster. The barley is going to take a bit longer to cook, so I'm adding a little extra. I'm really kind of covering it with the broth. And I'm going to just let it cook for a little bit because we don't want to add the greens until the grain is fully cooked. So I'm just going to leave it here for a moment and come back. So one thing I wanted to add about this dish is, particularly if you're making a barley risotto, that's something I think you want to do the night before. It reheats really beautifully. So if you're eating it for breakfast, it's a great thing to make ahead. Serve it for dinner one night and then wait a day and serve it for breakfast the second day. So I never like to serve the exact same food 2 meals in a row. The body loves variety. The body loves regularity in terms of rhythm, in terms of times of eating, but it doesn't love, but it also loves variety in terms of ingredients. Okay, so while the, honey, can you just put this in the compost, please? So while the barley simmers, we're gonna get started on the salad. So in my book, it's called Vegetables for Breakfast from A to Z because I zoom in on a vegetable and sometimes more than one per letter. So for the letter W, the vegetable is watermelon radish, which is a really special radish because it has this creamy white skin and a beautiful bright pink interior. So I just picked these from my garden, which is why they're a little smaller than you might find in the store. And I'm also not sure how they're gonna look because I just picked them for the first time, but they look really gorgeous. So I'm just gonna, I'm gonna leave the skin on, but I'm just trimming it. And what we're going for here are matchstick shapes. So of course radishes are bitter and it's really nice to cut them in smaller pieces. So once again, I'm cutting this lengthwise, meaning from the root to the place where it connects with the earth, right? So an onion is an allium. It's not a root vegetable. A radish is a root vegetable, but both grow under the ground and both have roots and stalks and greens. So I'm gonna cut it lengthwise. Oh my gosh. And you can see the beauty of this radish. So it has this beautiful, the center is framed by the white and the green, and then it has this fuchsia, fuchsia color inside. Magenta, fuchsia, bright pink. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm going to cut these, oh my gosh, these are so beautiful. They're almost too beautiful to cut further, but that's the recipe and that's what I promised. So I'm gonna do that. But generally, so the thing about working with really fresh vegetables is you really get to appreciate how they grow. So look at this. I mean, it almost looks like a tree. So then I'm going to cut little matchsticks in each one. And they're going to be a lot tastier like this, a little less bitter. And it's going to integrate really well with the other ingredients of the salad.
If I could interrupt just
sure,
really quickly. Can we use other varieties of radishes if we can't find the watermelon radish?
Great question. Absolutely. So I also have this beautiful radish that this one I did not grow, but I like it because it's nice and long. So it's going to be really easy to cut nice long matchsticks. So you know what you're doing with this salad is you're really creating a sculpture. So you know the pieces, the size and the shapes of the pieces are kind of up to you. I love Matchsticks just because they give you, it seems like just the right amount of the vegetable. So, and look how beautiful. In each piece, you see green on both ends. The matchstick is bookended by the green ends, and then it has the white and the pink in the middle. There's something just really fragile and lovely, yet radishes are, of course, very strengthening. The Romans ate radish relish for breakfast. That was pretty much their go-to breakfast with bread. And as we know, the Roman civilization was very, very strong and powerful. So it's a good one to emulate. Okay, so I think I'm gonna make about one portion here, but of course you can keep going and make several portions. And the other ingredient to this salad is, I'm just gonna check on the risotto. Okay, so you can bring the camera over and you can see that it's simmering really, really nicely. And the grains, the barley grains are expanding. And if you're using a rice grain, it's probably gonna be, probably gonna have puffed a little bit more than mine. But notice I'm not adding the peas or the arugula yet. Just gonna add a little bit more of the broth. And I think I'm gonna turn the flame up a little bit. Okay. Back to the salad. Back to the salad. So here we have these beautiful pieces of radish. And because you asked the question, I'll show you that you could also, now with a radish this nice and long, you might even cut it in a different way. You know, you might cut it into these oblong pieces and then cut nice long matchsticks. Again, the beauty of this radish, I think, is the contrast between the skin and the flesh, but it's gonna make a really beautiful combination. So these are some carrots from the farm down the street. In the recipe, I think you need to hold it over. Sorry? Sure. Oh, okay. So I'm showing you. So the recipe calls for carrots with tops. So I got these straight from the farm, but guess what? They didn't have the tops. So the tops to speak of. So instead of, so it's a way to balance a dish, particularly a dish of a root vegetable dish, which carrots are, is to add the top to the dish. But since I couldn't get the tops, I'm going to use a little bit of mint, particularly on this nice hot day. So, so I'm going to show you, so this is a rainbow, these are rainbow carrots, yellow, orange, red, and purple. So I'm going to start with this one that seems to have a rainbow of its own. I'm just going to trim this.
It's like ombre.
It's an ombre carrot, my daughter says. Yep, amazing, miraculous. Okay. So, so the way to cut matchsticks out of carrots, you want to take these little hairs off because, believe it or not, because they're toxic. You can take this away, sweetie. Okay. So then you're going to cut the carrot into oblong. You're going to cut it on a bias into these oblong. Oh, look how beautiful this is. Wow. This has like a skeleton design inside. Really gorgeous. So you cut it into these oblong shapes, and then you cut the matchsticks out of them. Okay. So, so this turns out to be pretty yellow inside, yellow with some red, which is going to be a beautiful contrast to the pink and green and white of the watermelon radish. What's so amazing about cooking with vegetables is, of course, two are never the same. Each one is completely unique, has grown with completely a different amount of sunlight and rain and exposure to various minerals in the soil. Okay, so let's take a classic orange. this one's really pretty skinny. So I'm gonna cut it like this. There you go. And it's also not terribly bright orange. So by the way, we all think of Peter Rabbit as loving carrots, but I'm told the truth is it was radishes he was after. And my book is full of all these little fun facts like that. How are we on time?
It's 4:50.
So I just stabbed myself a little bit. Just gonna
Are you okay?
Yeah. Just gonna put a little cold water on it. Nothing serious. Okay. Whoops, can you get me Band-Aids, sweetie? I don't think it's there.
Yes.
Okay. And then I'm going to cut this purple one. And in the meantime, I'm just going to check on the mousse very gently, and you can see that it's starting to gel. So you don't want to pick it up too much. You just want to get a sense of whether it's gelling. Thanks a lot. Okay, repaired. So I'm going to keep going with these matchsticks.
Nancy, we just have one question about the risotto, if I can interrupt at this moment.
Sure.
If you're planning on serving it the second day, would you wait for the second day to add the greens to it, or can you do it the first night when you cook it all at once?
So that is a great question. So what I like to do is I definitely add the green. Well, you're planning on serving it twice or just once? If you're not planning on serving it at all until the next morning, then, no, can you just keep it down? Okay. Then I would, then I wouldn't add the greens. But what I usually do is I serve it once at night with the greens. So for argument's sake, let's just say the peas and the arugula that we're using today. And then when I reheat it, I add something fresh. I add something green and leafy and fresh. So it could be more of the same, but in my case, I would probably add something new. I would add maybe, you could add broccoli, or you could add mustard greens to give it a nice kick, or you could add spinach or Swiss chard or kale, just something to kind of liven it up, right? So whenever we reheat, we always want to add something fresh. So now I'm just gonna layer these pieces in a bowl. So I'm using the yellow and the orange and the purple, more of the yellow. And because I'm showcasing the watermelon radish in this dish, I'm gonna sort of add that at the end, place that on the top. But look, these white radishes look really gorgeous. There we go. So it's kind of like pick up sticks. It's a little random and really beautiful. And now, and as I said, if I'm making this for a whole family, I would keep going with the watermelon radish. So now I think I'm going to use some spearmint. And I have this gorgeous lemon mint in my garden. So I'm just going to chop it. So I'm gonna first make ribbons and then just chop it into really tiny little pieces. Okay. Sprinkle it on top. And in the recipe, so at this time of year, when we have so many, all of us in the Northeast have so many wonderful fresh vegetables, fruits growing, like berries. We have blackberries and raspberries. Okay, blackberries and raspberries and blueberries. So I'm probably going to garnish it with some of them. But in the recipe, I call for sections of orange because it's really nice and refreshing. So, so I thought I would just show you how that would look. You can just add some chunks of orange. And also the recipe calls for dressing it with lime juice. But because we're using lime on the dessert, I think I'm just going to dress it with a little bit of orange juice. I'm just having the squeezer. Thanks. And then I might use a few of these gorgeous blueberries. Okay, thank you. And I'm just gonna put a little orange juice and then finish it with a little, with some sea salt flakes. So the sea salt flakes just add a little bling, and they actually do. You can see they're kind of glittering. And then I always love to just finish with something beautiful, like a nice sprig of mint. And there you have it. One dish done. Okay, so now I'm gonna clean my knife and clean my board, and we're gonna check on the risotto. Okay, so can you bring the camera over here? So, so as you can see, now the barley is really starting to absorb the liquid, the broth. So if you're using risotto, I bet rice, I bet that yours is ready to add the vegetables. Because this is barley, it's going to take a little longer, and we have a little more time, so I'm going to let it keep cooking. You could taste it, but I can tell that this barley isn't quite soft enough. So I'm just going to add a little more. There you go. And I'm going to let it keep cooking. And I'm going to show you the dessert. So this is starting to gel, but it's not ready yet. One thing you can do with this, by the way, is you can put it in the freezer, and it makes a beautiful kind of sorbet. So I'm going to show you 2 ways to finish the dessert. So one way is you could just serve it so these I made this morning, and they've been in the fridge, and as you can see, they're gelled really nicely. So what we're going to do, I just need a line since I think the yellow one maybe, is we're going to garnish with a little bit of lime zest, which looks really beautiful. You might also want to add a few Maldon salt flakes. Give it a really nice kick. And then just a squeeze of lime juice is really refreshing. Now you can't use the lime juice before you gel this because it's really hard to gel citrus fruits. The agar-agar isn't going to work as well with citrus fruits because of the acidity in them. And as you may know, while lime and lemon are really acidic on the outside, once they're in your digestive system, they're actually alkalizing. One of those really interesting little facts. So, so then I'm going to just garnish each one with a nice melon ball, this time cantaloupe, for contrast. And you could also add a little mint leaf. And there you go. Now, you could also take it out of the container. So I picked these nasturtium leaves, and this one is more like a sorbet, and it just pops right out, right onto the leaf. And once again, I'm going to add some zest. And in this case, I'm gonna make it a little more dramatic, really covering it with lots of lime. It's really delicious. And again, adding some lime juice and a little bit of salt. And you could add a melon ball. You could add a little, some blueberries, and just make a really gorgeous dessert. Now, if you do choose to put this in the freezer, it has to be gelled before you put it in. So you want to wait till it's gelled. So here we have kind of different varieties. And if you use the larger, if you're using larger dessert cups, then I tend to just leave it in and just add the toppings right on top. Okay, so let's finish the risotto. So we have dessert and a matchstick. We can leave this here. And the radish matchstick salad ready. And now we're just going to finish the risotto. Okay. So I use this vegan cheese. It's a vegan Parmesan cheese, but you can use regular cheese. I'm just getting it ready. So I have fresh arugula from my garden, and I'm probably going to roughly chop it so that it really gets nice and small. But I'm going to put peas in first. So once again, I might just taste one to make the barley is going to be a little chewier than the rice. But I still think I want to taste it. So again, you want it to have a little tooth. Yeah, so this could stand to be cooked a little longer. It's 5:04, I think. Jennifer, right?
Yeah,
5:04. Sorry? 5:03. So what I'm going to do is, how about if I take a few questions and let my risotto simmer a little further. If you're using a rice, it's probably ready. Are there any questions, Jennifer?
Yes. Deborah would like to know where you buy the different types of salt that you're using.
Great question. So I actually mail order the Trop Bunny sea salt because I really love that one. There's a company called Saltworks, I think. It's in the index in my book. If you have my book, I give a few resources for salt. Kalustian's in New York City, that's also online, is a great resource for salt. They have hundreds of different sea salts. from all over the world, including black lava sea salt from Hawaii. This Kalima salt I also mail order. And the Maldon is pretty much available in any grocery store, I would say. Any decent grocery store. If you're all in Westport, I mean, what is that store?
Where is Westport?
At any good...
Is Westport in Florida?
No, sweetie. In any good food store, you'll find the Maldon sea salt flakes, and you'll also find different varieties of sea salt. I find a lot of them are overrated. I don't use Himalayan sea salt too much, the pink one. You have to taste, taste it yourself and decide.
Haley's?
Terrific. So we also wondered, what type of nasturtium are you growing that has a leaf that big?
So, that is such an interesting question, because last year my nasturtium did not work out at all. Not only did I not get flowers, but I didn't get really interesting leaves at all. This year, in the last 2 weeks with all of this heat, they just got huge. So these are from High Mowing Seeds in Vermont. I plant everything from seed. So they're either from High Mowing in Vermont, an organic seed company, or from John Sheeper right here in Bantam, Connecticut, in the northwest corner. I have seeds from both, and they've just been brilliant this year. I don't know why, but they're so beautiful, and they just make beautiful little plates.
Wow. Well, we're all very impressed by those. So we have one other question while we're still waiting for the barley. Would it be possible, or would it change the cooking at all if you covered the barley while it's cooking? Can you do that and make it cook? Would that let it cook a little bit faster, or do we need to keep it open?
So with risotto, if you're using any of those forms of rice, you don't want to cover it because it gets really mushy. I don't have a top large enough for this skillet, but yes, I think I would if I had the proper top. I think I would try it with the barley. I don't generally do it because I generally, have a lot of time to make this barley risotto. And I like for it to be, I often make it with, in the early spring, meaning February or March, I make it with mushrooms, with really woody mushrooms. So I like for it to be cooked for a long time. But definitely, if I had the proper lid, I would use it right here. Yeah, that's a great question. You don't want it, again, you don't want it to be mushy, but with barley, with this whole barley, that's not a danger. With pearl barley, you definitely wouldn't want to cover it because pearl barley gets mushy really fast.
Oh, cool. And in your book, do you have any, this will be the last one, I promise, for the moment. In the book, do you have any recipes for nasturtiums? So, people use the leaves in salad. It's pretty delicious. I do it all the time. But I don't think I do. So it's definitely not a featured vegetable. For N, I have Napa cabbage. I need to add a little liquid here. But I use it all the time. I use the flowers all the time. I'd say at this time of year, I constantly garnish with beautiful nasturtium flowers. So we're gonna add the peas first, right? So peas are protein. We shelled most of these peas. So they're gonna take a moment to cook, but again, you really want your peas to be bright green. Now the recipe calls for saffron, and in this moment in time, I have found, if I could say one thing about my cooking and how it has evolved during this time of pandemic, is substitution. I substitute all the time, and
And so for some reason I couldn't find my saffron. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of pepper instead. So we shell these peas from these, and when you shell them, you understand the magic of peas, how protected they are in the pod and how precious they are. So I'm gonna add these, and I'm gonna add a little pepper.
A lot of pepper.
A lot of pepper. My family loves pepper. And now I'm going to add the roughly chopped arugula. So the peas are going to be sweet, and they're protein. They grow in a pod. So I want to balance that energy with a leafy green. So I chose arugula just because it's growing in my garden and it's looking gorgeous. But you could use, as I said, kale or Swiss chard or spinach. But it's going to kind of weave itself into the barley. And if you're using cheese, now is a good time to add it. As I said, I'm using this vegan cheese, which really kind of melts nicely.
Can I try it?
After, sweetie. Okay. So what you want is you want a nice, creamy risotto. And the creaminess can come from the cheese, or in this case, the tree cheese, and, you know, the broth. You can serve it in a bowl. And finish it with some cheese. And, you know, if people want a little extra pepper. So there you go. I'm gonna let ours simmer a little bit longer. And again, this is a great dish to reheat for breakfast or for dinner another night. Yeah, so any other questions?
I just want to know how long it's going to take me to get to your house, because now I'm starving.
So this, I think, is the main disadvantage of a virtual cooking class. There's just something really wonderful about then feeding people and tasting together and sharing. But I do have two tasters here.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm gonna have a taste first. So again, I always encourage my students to cook and eat with all five senses. Oh my gosh, so delicious.
Oh, well, now that we are all very jealous of you and your family, Nancy, for this fabulous meal that you have for tonight, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to come and share your kitchen with us and your fabulous recipes. For those of you at home, there is still time to order a book plate signed copy of Vegetables for Breakfast, A to Z, through the registration link that you used. Oh, wait, before we go, one last question. Kathleen would like to know, did you add the parsley, basil? Saffron we don't have today, but when do you add that just at the end?
Yeah, so you want to add the parsley at the very end, but thank you for reminding me. You do want to put it into the pan. As I said, I'm gonna let ours simmer a little longer. So it's the last thing. The herb, I have this gorgeous parsley. The herb is the last thing. It's really, you know, the last thing that you add. If you're adding cheese, you want to add the cheese before you add the herb to cream it up.
Oh, terrific. Thank you so much.
Chop up your parsley. And it's going to give it, it's going to be, add a little bit of green. Again, you always want to use Italian parsley, flat leaf parsley if you can. It has a lot more flavor. Most chefs don't use the curly leaf parsley. It just doesn't have the same flavor. It is said that it was once, it was thought to retard spoilage of food, which is why it always, I don't know about you guys, but when I was growing up, it always sort of appeared on the plate, on the side of the plate, just kind of one piece of curly parsley that didn't look that appetizing.
Right.
Yes, chop up your parsley and then you sprinkle it on in the pan.
Oh, terrific.
I love for this dish to be very green. I always try to use some vegetable. I do it with all kinds of vegetables from, you know, in the winter squash. But I like to have some contrast with the grain itself.
Oh, well, again.
I'm just curious to know how people cooked along.
Thank you again, Nancy. This was fabulous. And again, remember, you can buy her book and help out the Westport Library if you like, or you can buy it separately, or you can even borrow it from the library. And you can follow Nancy at www.youarebecauseYouEat.com. You've been watching it on her apron. And please remember to check out the websites for both the Westport Library and Wakeman Town Farm for more delicious programs. Thank you all for coming today. And as Julia Child would say, bon appetit.
Buon appetito.